Great Wednesday. Welcome to Healing America's Narratives. I'm your host, King, and I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. Good to be here with you on a Wednesday morning. And before you ask, I'm showing up with a spiritual energy of 10, which I kind of had to choose this morning a little bit. I was a little bit tired. We were just sharing, I had just over a foot and a half of snow to navigate in the last 2.5 days. Um, but otherwise, I can't complain.
Okay. Well, I join you equal. I'm a 10 as well. You know, I didn't have lately, since I've been going through my 180-day journey to become more fully human and updating my frequency to love energy. I don't have to choose it anymore. Like I program my mind to get control of that voice in my head, and as a result of doing that, I'm vibrating at a high frequency every day. I'm full of energy, and I wake up at 10, and I'm at 10 throughout the day through my actions and thoughts.
Okay. It sounded like you said, I wake up at 10, but that's not what you said.
Oh, that's my St. Louis accent. I said, yes, I wake up as a 10 every day. And, and it sustains me throughout the day. I tell you, man, it's just a great feeling. So I'm equal with you. I'm a 10.
Great. So I'll jump into the gratitude moment. I'm grateful to be in a warm room right now. This morning, when I got up, it was -3 degrees outside. It's been, in single digits for, and the teens for about 4 days in a row now here. And so I have a roof and walls and heat, and I'm really grateful for that. Indoor plumbing, clean drinking water. We didn't lose power during the storm, so I'm grateful for the infrastructure that allowed me to still have electricity. Good friends, family, and I do work that I care about. So I just found out that the course I'm teaching, which is based on Healing America's Narratives at University of Connecticut's Osher Lifelong Learning Center, this spring semester, in the first week and a half of registration being available, it filled up. There's a waiting list for my course. I'm grateful for that as well.
That's great news. Congratulations.
Yeah, maybe I'm doing something right.
I know you are. So, I've been going through a course with you for the last 2 years, 2.5 years now. So I know the value of your teaching. So congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
And I'm grateful. I'll go into, oh, I'm sorry, were you done?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. So I'm grateful for my life, my health, my ability to sit here, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. Another 24 hours to be alive. I'm grateful to be vibrating at a higher frequency. I'm working closer and closer to get to the frequency of 500 hertz, based on David Hawkins' scale, map of consciousness, which I may bring back up again as a reference point. We discussed that. And I'm grateful to be on a call with you. As I said before, knowing you, building with you, co-creating with you has really been a blessing to me, and I respect that and I honor that, and I'm grateful for that. Every Wednesday we get a chance to hop on a call and build. So that's my gratitude moment for today.
Yeah, beautiful.
And with that being said, one last thing I want to do. I know we said I wanted to add this to the show just to really set the context. Tell me something good.
Nah, I'm just kidding. So right now I have down out off of the camera. There's a 17-year-old cat who joined our family back in July when my significant other's mother died, and my room is, is the warmest room in the house during the day. So he's right down there. He may come and paw at me because he wants some affection during the show. I'll have to kind of ignore him. But it's a good thing. It's a reminder, just caring for another living being, and he appreciates me in whatever way he does that, and I appreciate him. So that's Chip the cat. Is I can't really show him to where he is, but that's a good thing in my life. Even though there are times when I say, okay, Chip, give me a break, man, because he'll start mewing and like hitting me with his paw on my ankle to get my attention. But that's more good than any kind of inconvenience.
All right. Well, you know, I don't. Yeah, I did share that with you. That was last Tuesday, so I know I shared that with you. Um, my good thing I would say is this: just continue the growth. Like I said, December 25th, I started a journey where I said I was going to intentionally program my algorithm, YouTube, which is one of the social media mediums that I use daily. I was going to program that so that it would help me as opposed to teach me or control me, because algorithms are built to control you and keep you constantly scrolling. So for me, it was like, well, if I'm going to constantly keep scrolling, then it's going to be scrolling information that I choose and I give it. And since doing that, that started December 25th, um, and combining that with getting up each morning and going through affirmations for 20 minutes,
Mhm.
and then going through my gratitude moment, and then also controlling my night, going to bed and getting my mind ready at night, I realized two key things that no matter what else you deal with in life, you have to own the first 30 minutes of your morning at a minimum and the last 30 minutes of your night at a minimum. Those two things you have to control. And you have to intentionally choose deliberately what you put in your mind.
Mhm.
And I didn't used to do that. I used to just kind of watch TV till I fell asleep. And I would watch horror movies or serial killer movies. For some reason, I got a sick interest in that. I don't know where it comes from. But I stopped doing that. And as a result, the last 33 days, now this has been the 34th day, um, I'm vibrating at a higher energy. And my thoughts are better. My thoughts are clear. And I see things totally different. And I'm grateful. And that's my good story. I can spend hours on going into all the things I've discovered, but I just sum it up by saying that's my good story. I'm just love the growth I'm going through. Every day is a journey. Every day is experience. And it really, when you choose intentionally to grow and do things on a daily basis to grow and kind of I have a 6 month window I'm doing it with, that to me, you really experience life in a different way.
Mhm.
So that's my good story for today.
Yeah, beautiful. It was actually it's a great lead in. I think you might be like subliminally impacting my mind from a distance again, like you did last week. Um, People have to tune into last week's show to understand what we're talking about. But the topic we're going to get into today is just that. You know, uh, choosing how to be on a moment to moment basis in your life. No matter what's coming at us, we have the ability, and some of us have it more, and some of us have it left for less for various reasons we can get into. Um, but we have the ability to choose how to be in any given moment. Um, and especially, not only now, but especially now where, we could have said this in any point in history, both in the United States and around the world, where there's always something going on. Americans, and specifically Americans who would consider themselves in the majority from a racial or from a wealth standpoint. I shouldn't say majority from a wealth standpoint, but majority in terms of comfort and things have worked okay for them, for the most part. They're finding themselves in a different place right now, which is really challenging and difficult as bad things are happening to good people that they can identify with. And as you've said in the past, it's um, again, not to create any kind of a monolith, but what we see with the abuse at the hands of federal law enforcement right now, especially in Minnesota, but not only in Minnesota, um, blacks have been suffering at the hands of law enforcement um, for 250 years in this country. Um, so it's new to some people. But more to the point, that little history lesson aside, um, you just spoke beautifully to a decision that you made, that you wanted to intentionally impact how you were going to be in the world. And it's not like say, okay, I'm going to be more positive today and then hope it happens, but you're doing practice. You're engaging in specific things. Some involve going someplace for some training and diet and just a whole different environment. And I'm going to let you can say more about that if you choose to. Um, but it's an intentional choice in terms of how you want to be in the world. And that's what we want to talk about today, because in terms of any kind of healing, whether it's America's narratives or it's, the pain in my right big toe, or which I don't have, I'm just making up something there. We always have a choice. I'll say one more thing, and you and I have discussed. We have our own respective favorite quotes from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. My favorite is, and this is again taking place in the concentration camps in World War II, where he was. This is his first person experience, not that he heard about it, but he said basically everything can be taken from a man except the final choice, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, the freedom to choose one own's way. And he said man when he wrote it, so I wanted to use his language. Obviously, he's talking about human beings. So we always have that freedom, even though at times we're caught up in our habits of mind or our cultural givens, so we don't feel free. So when we're photographing, videotaping ICE agents, if I'm an ICE agent, if I'm the president of the United States, if I'm a news reporter, if I'm whatever, whoever I am, if I'm Reggie Mara speaking to King right now, I do have the freedom of choice in terms of how to be. And to the extent I've done my work, I have more freedom of choice than someone who is still had by his or her or their habitual habits of mind, or what we might call cultural givens. If I don't know what has me, it will continue to have me. If I don't know my own stories and habits of mind, they will make the choices for me. So the beautiful example you gave was deciding not to stop using social media, but to use it in a skillful way so that it serves you rather than addicts you. So that's in 21st century human experience, that could be one of the most important lessons anybody learns. So good for you for doing that and for sharing it.
Well, thank you for saying that. And since we're on Viktor Frankl and basing your topic, how to think, during times, I think that's first of all, let me congratulate you again for choosing such a wonderful and timely topic. I think that's crystal clear and imperative in today's world more than ever before. I remember back in I believe it was the 90s that, or maybe the 80s, that I'm not sure when his book came out. When I got exposed to it, though, it was in the 90s by Noam Chomsky, Manufacturing for Consent. Mm-hmm. And again, he was talking about then what the media and corporations were doing to get people to become just in the consumer mindset. And social media just took that to the 10th power, gave it a times 10 component to it. And now it's literally to the point where if you're not intentionally choosing what you feed your mind, not only your body, but your mind as well, because your mind is going to determine what you put in your body. So that's the first step. If you're not intentionally choosing that and going back to how you think, then you're going to be victim. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be victim to a system that is not in your best interest. And I say this again, I'm going to keep referencing this, and I want to make sure I explain it so folks don't misunderstand and misinterpret what I mean by this. But like I said, to me, everything comes down to the system of white supremacy. And to be clear, I'm not talking about a pigment of a man's skin. I'm speaking of I call it a global governing software. The system was designed by and for the 1%, the global elite who control the world's resources and levers of power. And if you're not in that boardroom, then you're not the beneficiary. And you might get some benefits over other people, but as Trump's administration shows you, that if you're not in their boardroom, you can go to regardless of the color of your skin if you're not fitting their agenda. So people need to be clear on that. And the racial construct is simply the code used to keep the other 99% of us in a state of friction, always arguing, always debating and fighting. And then we got to need sports or alcohol or other vices to try to get some form of joy in our lives. But That's what people have to understand. That's what you're dealing with. And that's why it's so important to really control your thoughts and be intentional about it. And in a daily active, it's not something you can just say, okay, I've done it and I'm in control of my thoughts and just move on. No, every single day you're fighting the construct to control you. The minute you wake up in the morning, that phone goes off, that announcement goes off, however you allow yourself to wake up, whether it's an alarm clock, if you're old school, or the phone nowadays as your alarm clock, telling you right now. Like I used to even have on my alarm clock on my phone when it went up, when it went off to wake me up, it would give me the news, and then it's giving me, all this negative information immediately before I even really got my brain together. Yeah, it's still transitioning from the subconscious to the conscious mindset. I'm getting fed all this negative news. It does nothing for my spirit or my soul,
Mm.
and so that's why I decided to change that. And I challenge folks to that. Do it for 30 days and just see how you feel. Put yourself through a 30-day cycle and just see, once you control your thoughts, the morning and the evening, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the evening, you control those two time frames, preparation for the morning, and then analysis at night, reflection at night. See where you are. See if you still have the same feelings towards the others that you think that are not in your so-called tribe. See if you feel the same way about those individuals as you did starting 30 days. I bet you won't. I bet you,
Mhm.
at least I don't, and I haven't. And so I say all that to say that's where I feel people need to be at. They need to be looking at how I can be a better person going forward, particularly for folks who are, I would say, if you are Generation X or older, you definitely need to be thinking that way. Because I know at 56 years old, I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning. And that's a reality. It doesn't scare me. I just accept it. So, in accepting that, do I want to spend the remaining years of my life, however long that may be, the same way I spent the first half of my life? No. I'm literally in the fourth quarter, right? And literally sudden death, right? Verbally, literally, using the football metaphor. But now the question becomes, how do you address that fourth quarter? Are you going to play the same way you played it for the first three quarters? Because again, as I said before, the system is rigged, so it's changed its method, it's changed its plays, it's coming at you differently. It's coming at you to really get at your emotional strings and get you reacting to news and information to not for your benefit, but for their benefit. And that's what you got to understand, regardless of the media source you're getting it from. And so I wrap up my first section by saying there's a quote, my favorite quote by Viktor Frankl is, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only lack, but only by lack of meaning and purpose.
Mm.
That's when it's made unbearable." And I've seen that. Actually, I see that in people I know personally in my family who are lacking meaning and purpose. And because they're lacking meaning and purpose, life is unbearable to them right now. They're in constant victim mode, which leads to depression. And then I'm going to bring up the map of consciousness in a second. But those thoughts now put you at anger. They put you at fear. They put you at those low vibrating thoughts. And low vibration thoughts don't ever produce anything positive at all. You're never going to say, I'm thinking about anger and greed, uh, and think that something's going to come out of it that's better for you and humanity. It's not. So you got to raise your level of thinking up that scale and start vibrating at a higher pace. So that's my first take.
Yeah, great. Just to go back to that, you're talking about the first 30 minutes in the morning when you get up and the last 30 minutes before you go to bed. Just to make this more real for people. And what I'm going to say next isn't a prescription for what somebody else should do. It's just an example. Back when I was, I was going to say in my 50s, I say, but back when I was your age, so probably somewhere in my early 50s when I started, realizing I had had both my hips replaced when I was 49, and there's a whole story behind that, which I won't tell right now. But I realized that I had to start doing some things differently with my body. I mean, I was in good shape, but I had done some silly things when I was between the ages of 16 and 19 with regard to sports, and it damaged the cartilage. But I had been meditating for, I don't know, probably 15 years prior to that in the morning. But I began when the alarm went off in the morning. I would stretch in bed for maybe 5 minutes, recite a couple of very basic prayers of gratitude, just thank you for this day, and then I would recite the Serenity Prayer. Give me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Out of bed, I'd go and wash my face. Then I would, standing up, do a series of gentle movements and stretching that took me probably 10 or 12 minutes. And then I would sit on the meditation cushion for another 10 or 15 minutes. So basically the first, I didn't try to time this, but from waking up and stretching in bed, saying a couple of quick prayers, washing my face, gentle movement and stretching, standing up, and then meditating, in the vicinity of the first 45 minutes of waking, I didn't say a word to another human being. I did not have any electronic input, the outside world, other than if it was during the summer, I might hear a bird chirping. In the winter, they were still sleeping too. But that was just, it gave me this calm, intentional beginning to the day. Didn't drastically, that alone didn't drastically change who I was, but I was already doing a lot of reading and writing and poetry and coaching and different things. So it helped ground me. And I can't say exactly how it helped me, but I know how I was before I began doing that. And the ability for me to calm myself, the ability for me, when I feel myself being triggered by something or someone, which that still happens, right? Just so we're clear, I'm not a candidate for sainthood, but I have the ability to recognize that I'm being triggered and to pause and make, Viktor Frankl's choice before I respond to whatever it is that's going on. So just to basically corroborate what you're talking about, I just began to just take different things from other people's practices or for what I thought I needed personally, especially with my hip replacements. But that idea of getting my body gently and slowly awake in the morning, keeping my mind calm. And the only words I would say, which were to myself, were basic prayers of asking for serenity, courage, wisdom, and gratitude. So it helps. And if anybody hears this and laughs about it or mocks it, try it. Try it for at least 21 days or a month. See how it goes, but do it in good faith, and see what happens. It's not magic. It's not going to drastically. It could drastically suddenly change your life. The odds are it won't, but you'll begin to feel differently. So we do get to choose, and the more we practice in making positive, grateful, wise, compassionate choices, the better able we will be to make those type choices in the most challenging moments in our life. And I'm going to mention a specific recent example of that when we pick somebody who we think is fully human. At the end of the podcast, I have someone in mind already who yesterday just did a remarkable thing. I thought chose how to be in a really difficult moment. So I'll stop there.
Looking forward to hearing that. And I agree with you. I push back on one thing you said there. I think it will change you. You said it may not change you. I think it will, because it changes your thoughts first, and that's the first step. You can't change your thoughts. Your situation, your circumstances won't change before your thoughts do, right? And I think some people want that. They think that way. That if I got this raise, then my life would change. Or if I got this client, if I got this large sum of money, if I met this woman or this man or whatever romantic partner you're looking for, there's always some external you're looking for to say, if I got that, it would be different. And that's where the critical thinking skills come into play, because you can look at people who have that, who have more money than you probably thinking you want to make, who have that beautiful husband or wife, and they're not happy. I mean, we can look at the celebrities who get married, who seem to be Hollywood's royal elite. They have the looks that everybody wants. I remember going back to Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, right? They got married and everybody thought, wow, that's a perfect couple. Then they started adopting children from all around the world. They were doing their what they felt with their humanitarian. And I'm not judging them. I'm just making a point that they've shown you that you can have the looks, you can have the money, you can have the fame, yet and still you still don't find peace. You're not finding that fulfillment in your life. And that's where I'm advocating for. And that comes from changing your thoughts. So regardless of where you are in your life, that's the first thing you can control. You can control your thoughts. And now for me, I'm a again, I mentioned several times throughout these shows, I'm a system engineer. I always mention that to set the context why I come up with the different things I come up with because I think in frameworks. It's just how I think and how I process everything's, and it's because of the system engineering training I've received, as well as reading the books, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the 4 Agreements, the 17 Laws of Success, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of leadership. It's always a numeric value. So that got me thinking always in numbers and frameworks. And so I came up with a framework for decision making. And my framework that I came up with was there's 6 steps to decision making that you really want to put something through. Now, some people will say that's very rigid and I don't have time to do that. Then that's the problem. I'm saying take time to do it. Take a deep breath and put yourself through this framework, which I'm going to explain. And again, do it for 30 days and see if your decisions are better, if your outcome in life is better, or you vibrating at a higher frequency as a result. And the first level is you want to do kind of a check to see the first question you ask yourself, does this data I'm receiving in, regardless of where it's coming from, does this advance or create value for humankind? Now, I put the versions of caring about others first as the first framework because that to me puts you in the position of being a servant, a person that's committed to service. And I believe that that's why we were put here on this earth is to be a service. God uses us to perform service for others. We just wrestle with how we do it. He gives us freedom of choice too. So some of us choose not to do it, but I believe that's what we were put here on earth to do. So that's the first question you ask yourself. Does it give value to humanity and others? The next question you want to ask yourself is for you, does this help me grow as a person to be a better person, more aligned with what your goals are in life? And that's the second question. So the answer is no to both of those, then you don't need to go through the rest of the list because it's not going to be beneficial to the greater good, meaning humanity and others. Can you create value with it? Or does it bring you intrinsic value as an individual? The answer is no to those. Then why even consume it? Let it pass like a cloud in the sky. The third being, does it, and I got this from Bob Marley because I love Bob Marley, but he has a song called Satisfy My Soul. And this is what I ask again. Does it satisfy your soul, right? Do you feel it deep down that this feels good? This is something that makes me feel fulfilled, or I could be fulfilled if I implement this new data I'm receiving. That's another test. The fourth test is your governing principles. Now, I'm really big on that, and I got that from Stephen R. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a book that talks about the importance of establishing principles. And these governing principles that I have in my life, I always rate things and vet things, of course. According to those principles, determine whether or not I want to engage in it, whether it's a relationship, whether it's data, all of that. And then the fifth is you got to look at, and I got this from Native Americans. They call it the 7-generation rule. So if I do engage in this activity or based on this data that wants me to do an action, will it be something that's sustainable that it would benefit folks from 7 generations down the road, or is it something that's going to benefit me for the day, the moment? Like I'm hungry right now. I just saw a McDonald's commercial. Let me get something to eat. It's fast. It's convenient. I want to satisfy that hunger. But then you put it through that list. Does it bring value to others? Maybe. It brings employment to some folks who work at McDonald's, get jobs. So yeah, so it can get past that test. Second test, does it help me grow? No, McDonald's is not going to help you grow, right? So you can easily stop that. I'm just giving an example of that framework. And then last thing I would say, which is the number 6, I put everything now in the 6 month rule that if you're going to do something now, can you commit to it for 6 months? And if you are 40 years or older and you haven't got your discipline established in your life, that you can commit to something for 6 months that's meaningful for you, that you know would benefit you. If you're still wrestling with that lack of discipline, then I don't know what to tell you. I'm thinking of folks who actually have established that, have careers, have achieved successes in their life. They're married, divorced, raised kids, have careers. So you've achieved some level of success, proven to yourself that you can do things you put your mind to. But the 6 month rule now says, can I sustain it for 6 months? But you evaluate it every 30 days. So every 30 days, you're looking to say, do I need to pivot? What did I learn? What did I adjust? But I'm sticking with it for 6 months. And again, this is not something I'm telling you to do just because it sounds great theory wise. It's something I'm going through right now. And the reason I feel compelled to share it with folks is that I'm literally doing it. And it's literally changing my life. And I feel that I'm a different person because my thoughts are different. And then because my thoughts are different, my behaviors are different. Because my behaviors are different, my circumstances are different, the outcomes are different. So all of that becomes a causation, a chain of causation that has me vibrating at a very high frequency. And then I wrap this up by saying that now to combine all of that thinking, that 180-day journey, with saying now what I'm going to do to really raise my frequency. Because I say for me, I think it's two frequencies. Hawkins doesn't get into this as much, but again, this is me kind of adapting Hawkins to fit my perspective and what I want to do in life and my direction. I think it's two types of frequencies. I think you have your thoughts frequencies, where I think that the map of consciousness we have on the screen outlines your thought frequency. Then you have your action frequency. Your action frequency is going to be, are you putting action to those thoughts? Because a lot of people say, okay, I believe in serving, I believe in giving, I believe in helping others, but then they don't put any action to it. It just dissipates and goes away. But you're thinking at 500 hertz, but you're not acting at 500 hertz. The goals that have that duality where they merge and you're actually acting at 500 hertz. That's what my goal is. And that's why I'm sharing this journey with folks.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's a lot there. I wish next time you do that, you should put up like the 6 decision making steps, like have a visual for that too. But that was beautiful. I mean, I really appreciate your sharing that. The one thing that, when you push back on me about it, whether or not it's going to change people, I agree with you 100% that it's probably going to change you. But what I was doing, what I've learned to do, as a coach, is to under promise and over produce. So I don't come in and say, if you set up a practice and do something like, when you get out of bed in the morning and before you get out of bed, that suddenly things are going to be great. And then if it's not suddenly great, as you said, 6-month practices, give yourself 6 months to see what happens. Check in every 30 days. So I was basically under promising in order to overproduce. So but I agree that change will take place. That's my extensive sales background. That's completely a joke for anybody that's here for the first time. So what I want to do is offer a set of questions. I'm going to do this. I don't have this up in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I can do it. These are not mine. I forget where they come from. Actually, I do remember it. One of my colleagues, Brett Thomas, I think first articulated these to me. And this is more of a responding type series of steps as opposed to a proactive, but you can do it proactively. So when something happens that you feel warrants a response, here's a series of questions that can be really helpful. The first one, this is the foundational one, is what's really happening right now? Right? And you have to ask that question from a deep place of good faith and as close to objectivity as you can get. None of us is objective, but you want to get to the truth of what's happening, not translating it through your liberal or conservative worldview or whatever your biases are, your cultural givens. What really is happening right now? Or if it's in the past, what just happened? And get an answer to that. And sometimes to get a sense of what just happened, you might have to ask some other people. But that's the foundation. Okay. So what really is happening, or if it's in the past, what just happened? And you have to be committed to getting to the truth. You can't just be happy with your habitual mindset. So that's one. Once you have a sense of what is happening or what just happened, um, the next question is what needs to be done, including nothing. So what needs to be done, and that means maybe nothing needs to be done. If if what just happened is um, the beginning of a major storm, maybe what needs to be done is just get in the house if you're fortunate enough and stay there. So that's something. So what needs to be done, and that includes doing nothing. And the third question is related to that. So it's what needs to be done, including nothing, and by whom. So who needs to react to this? Who needs to respond to this? And then the last one, number 4, implicates me, the person asking the questions. What's my role in all of this? What is it that I need to do? So what's really happening? Let's get to the truth of what I'm experiencing right now. What needs to be done, including nothing. So what's the appropriate response? Who's responsible for this? So what needs to be done and by whom? And then fourth, what do I need to do, including nothing? So those 4 things, they're very basic, they're very general, but they're really helpful because sometimes some of us have to learn to realize, oh, this is my responsibility and I need to take responsible action. And others of us who perhaps are overly scrupulous and uber responsible have to say, in this moment, this isn't mine to deal with. So it depends. There's not a one size fits all because we're all so different. We have different histories and we're going to have different views. But those 4 questions can be really useful, not as biblical truth, not that biblical truth is even always very useful, but that's another story. Keep those cards and letters coming. So 4 questions that can help in any given set of circumstances.
Well, those are good questions, and again, thank you for sharing that. It's my responsibility. I think that's clear. I also think a person has to be in a position where they don't see themselves as a victim if they ask themselves that question. Because that question definitely comes from someone, again, who I think, and again, I'm not saying everything I say is 100% true or correct. It's just how I govern my life and what I lead my life by. But I think a person would have to be at a level of seeing that they have some form of control over their life. They're not 100% victim. If they can ask themselves that question honestly and decide to move on it. But I think it's a great way to get people thinking. And that's the whole point, I believe, of our conversation, how to think. And you got to be a critical thinker in today's time. Because again, like I said, there is no middle ground. You either are in control of your thoughts or someone else is. There is no middle ground that people need to think about. Because again, and we all are fighting that. I'm not saying I'm completely away from the control of the construct, but I would say I control at least more than 60% of my thoughts and actions now, and I'm working toward get to the point of 100%. But I think you can't get to 100% unless you do what the monks do. You remove yourself completely from society, read all day, meditate, and be around others in the same energy with you. Then yeah, you can get to 100% because then you're not receiving that data from some source. Even if you don't watch the news, like I don't as much anymore, because I ask myself, what is it doing for me? Yeah, I can be informed and I can talk about other people, but then that takes energy to get in these conversations with other people. And here's what I realized as well, Reggie. At 56, I got about 10 hours of what I call burst energy in me every day. That's 10 hours where I can be completely focused and dialed in and deep work mode, all those things. Outside of 10 hours, you're not getting 100% of me, not getting the best of me, right? And I think that's for most people, to be honest, because if you really look at the math, you got 10 hour, that's 10 hours in that context, and you got 8 hours of sleep, that's 18 hours there. Now you got to add 6 hours for travel, family, everything else you're dealing with. So most people, if they structure their lives that way, can have 10 hours of bursts. And what we've been taught to believe and do, instead of maximizing the 10 hours, again, I might be clear, I'm not talking about 10 consecutive hours from 9 a.m. to uh, 4 p.m. in the evening. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about throughout the day. So you can break it up into 2 hour uh, chunks and take a break, or a 1 hour sprint, take a break. However you want to structure that, that's you can do. But again, that's just me. And in doing so, I realized with the intention that I'm living my life by, I don't have time for social media. Because then I got to ask myself, which one of those hours I want to sacrifice to watch social media that's not giving me growth, that's not doing something for me based on those six qualifying questions or criteria I put myself through. And I'm really becoming more rigid intentionally, because that's what I believe we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with a world that requires that type of intentionality. And I do want self mastery. And that's my goal. Is the remaining years of my life in this fourth quarter is, how do I really master self? For years, I read all the books from Tony Robbins initially. I took Tony Robinson's course back when a friend of mine gave me Tony Robbins' 30-day. I think it's called a Power of Achievement, a Power of something. I remember
I think
Power,
it's personal power, I think is what he called it.
personal power, right? And he told me, King, you listen to this. This will change your life. And I listened to it, and then I felt it didn't change my life then. So I was expecting, again, to your point, an immediate result. Like, somebody was on, after the completion of the last CD, somebody's gonna come knock on my door and say, here's a job you want, and here's a check to go with to get started. But what I realized as I look back hindsight, it did change my life, because it started putting me on the radar and increasing my awareness for people like Stephen R. Covey and Deepak Chopra, which Tony Robbins referred to his master class as elite people, and then Napoleon Hill. And so it did change my life. So that's what I'm saying. It planted the seed initially, and then it just began to grow. And throughout the years, I've read more and I'm more. But see, here's a problem I ran into. And this is where the coach like yourself comes into play. And that's why I believe people need a coach. You can intellectually understand it. You can quote it. You can have all the affirmations on the board and all your mirror notes and all that. But if you don't really practice it, it's just information. It's like going to buy fruits and vegetables and then put them in your freezer and throw them away 7 days or 5 days later because they spoil, because you still ate fast food instead of eating the vegetables. Yeah, you did it, but you didn't use it. You didn't apply it. So that's what I want people to really understand, that that's what we're advocating. And you need someone like a Reggie, who's a coach, to help you say, did you do what you said you was going to do? Hmm. Why not? And really give you those kind of questions, because in your mind, you think, you listen to that voice, I didn't have to do it because it snowed, or I didn't have to do it because it's late, or because I'm tired, or because I didn't have any money, or because my girlfriend made me mad, or my boyfriend cussed me out. So all those become legitimate reasons to you, but if you got a coach that can help you think through, and all, life's going to happen anyway. You got to do it, despise that. And how do you get back on track? And what's your true north?
Yeah, I love the example, the difference between collecting information, having, getting the information and understanding some things. And I like to use the word, but not embodying them. So in other words, one thing to know something, it's something else to embody it. And that's another example of where the, folks who are, living strictly in the digital age, social media, I mean, the internet at large, the World Wide Web at large, but social media in particular, allows us to get bullet points of information, millions of bullet points of information, and they're information, they're not knowledge. Sometimes they're true, sometimes they're false, sometimes they're more or less true-ish, but they're not a solid knowledge base. And like fast food, they're easy to get and digest. You think you know something because you just read X number of characters on some social media site. It's like, maybe one or two complete sentences coming from somebody who might not be that smart, even if they're a public figure. So I'm gonna kind of be a little bit critical and self-serving for a moment. Um, I'm not against social media or certain uses of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a great resource librarian, where if I'm doing my work and I want to see if I've missed anything, sometimes I can ask a question to artificial intelligence and just see if there's something that I didn't know about in terms of my writing. That's useful. I have no problem with that. But when I had to write a paper, because we're speaking about ages here, young man. Like I'm 71, so all of my papers in high school and college were written on typewriters. Like their personal computers didn't exist yet. I hate to say it. My second or third year of teaching, or maybe fourth or fifth year of teaching in the early '80s, personal computers, like these little things started appearing in schools, but I didn't have one yet. But if I wanted to know something or learn something or write a paper, I had to go to the library, whether it was a public library, high school library, university library. I had to go to the card catalog or to the periodicals. I had to do a specific search. You didn't type it in. You went with a little piece of paper and you searched for the thing you wanted. The librarian would get it for you, and then you read it. And if it was a book, you could take it home and keep it for 2 weeks or whatever. And you had to read it and take notes. So that was scanning information in order to build a knowledge base. That's way different from going to 15 different sites in 30 minutes trying to get a quote about what Kristi Noem just said about the killing in Minneapolis. I just didn't mean to go back there, but that was top of mind. And there's a lot of information online about that. But unless you really take your time and get the information from various sources who don't necessarily agree with each other, and do your due diligence to get to the heart of what's true and what's not, you don't have knowledge. You just have a lot of people's opinions about what may or may not be true. And you didn't have to work hard to get it. So for me, it's a whole different world. And I'm not saying my world was better. There are certain things I like. I still use a hard copy thesaurus when I want to check on a word and what might be better. Because the online thesaurus doesn't have as much information as what I have in my book. It might have more entries, but it doesn't go as deep for me. And that's just my bias. I'm not saying that the online stuff isn't any good.
I don't judge.
Yeah. So it's the willingness to do the work to both learn something, to understand it, and then getting back to what we originally began talking about, to practice in order to embody it. And that's what you've been talking about, do this for 6 months, try it for 6 months, check in and revise if necessary every 30 days. And practice, then see what happens. Some of the best research says that in order to grow developmentally, to increase your developmental worldview, meditation is one of the quickest ways to do that. But to actually grow one developmental level, what they call a vertical level, from a traditional worldview to a modern worldview, or a modern worldview to a postmodern worldview, the research says that it takes in the vicinity of 4 to 6 years of meditation to do that, to grow one developmental worldview. So if you're looking for a quick fix, there's a reason why addiction is not a good thing. You need to do some work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And see, one of the things you're talking about, first I want to say this, is that technology I liken to fire, particularly AI, right? In the wrong hands of not knowledge, it can burn down a house. It can destroy, it can kill. In the right hands, it cooks food and gives us flavor or warms us in the winter, right? And for me, I look at social media, not social media, I'm sorry, AI in particular, it's a tool. in my
Mhm.
toolbox.
Yeah.
And much like, you know, a carpenter can build a swing set with a screwdriver, and get out there and be old school all day, twisting and turning around. You can have a drill and drill in things to be done in half the time. That's how you, for me, that's what AI's purpose is. But I get where you're from and your perspective. Everybody has, once you've gotten your rhythm as far as how you want to research, how you want to view information, then it's easier to stay there instead of trying to adjust a different way. And now, with that being said, now let's switch to what you talked about earlier in your take. We talked about the fact that people getting information in, and it's really just noise that people are getting.
Mhm.
And because they're not critical thinkers, they don't understand how to distinguish what noise is and who to look at as experts. Like you said, some people can give you that 3 or 4 word, 3 or 4 sentence. You said 2 or 3 sentence line, and then you think you've informed about something because it is data. But is that you know information that you can now grow with or learn with, or where did that person get that information from? And to me, the construct intentionally brings people and pays people a lot of money to make that happen. And that's why I said that when we got to get past the racial lens, because then you don't see it if you are looking through it through a racial lens. So the construct now uses people like Stephen A. Smith. He gets paid $20 million a year from ESPN. Just think about that, $20 million a year. He makes more money than some athletes, right? And you ask yourself, if we do that on a market comparison level, what is the value that he really brings to the marketplace to warrant 20 million? I mean, doctors save lives and they don't get paid 20 million a year, right? Teachers help inspire you as yourself, teach people's kids and help make the world a better place, and they don't get paid a fraction of that. But this guy gets paid $20 million a year. And what I came up with, the reason why I call him a I call him a conflict entrepreneur,
Hmm.
right? This is somebody he's monetized conflict. His voice is designed to provoke, argue, and create binary opposition. Win, lose, us, them. It's loud, theatrical, and unambiguous. Now, again, the tribe he's working at, an audience addicted to the adrenaline and argument. That tribe you talked about of folks who like to consume the information in 2 to 3 sentences or from a tweet or from a post. He's created, him and the guy Skip Bayless, his partner, black and white, working together, right? So let's get, again, throw away this racial construct because it's hitting us from both. They created this whole idea of hot takes and just coming with giving you an opinion on sports. And it changed the landscape from sports giving you an analysis where you had people like Stuart Scott and George Michael originally did, that gave us that we all, if you love sports, you grew up watching them, and took it to, I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm going to be loud about it. I'm going to try to stand on it. And I'm going to use that because that's how most people in their own personal lives, the barbershops, the cookouts and all those things, that's how they discuss sports. So they took that and leveraged that and grew that to the point where not only does sports do that, but politics does it. And that's now become how we consume information in these hot takes and these little bits. And there's no deep thought analysis about them, to your point. And that's why I'd say at the end of the day, if you're not controlling your thoughts, someone else is. And he gets paid $20 million to do that.
Yeah, I think Bayless and Smith, are trying to copy us. Well, the commenter from 2 weeks ago called us what, Ebony and Ivory.
Ebony and Ivory, yeah.
Yeah, so that was an original comment. Um, so are we at the point now where I make believe I know what advice to give people?
Yeah. You do, actually. Like I said, you've been the key in my evolutional growth, so I know you have the advice to give people. So share some of that wisdom.
Well, I'm just going to reiterate what I said earlier. We're talking about, again, the topic today was how we choose to be in any given moment. Moment to moment in our life, we have a series of choices, and how we choose to be. Sometimes it's not every single second we have to choose. Sometimes it's, an hour at a time. Sometimes it's 30 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it happens to be. And there are many approaches to this. We can't share all of them at one time. But this idea again of getting really clear what's true in this moment, what's really happening, or what just happened, what needs to be done, and by whom. And what needs to be done includes doing nothing. So maybe nothing needs to be done. Who needs to do it? And then finally, the last one implicates the person asking the question. What's my responsibility? What do I need to do in this moment? And maybe it's nothing. That's just it's a really short, useful template just to get clear in any given moment. Sometimes I need to step in. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's already being taken care of. I don't need to. I mean, there's. I don't really watch commercial television, and I try and like if I'm watching a sporting event and the commercial comes on, I mute it. And I usually have a book, so I read during the commercials. But one insurance company, and I won't endorse any insurance companies, but one insurance company has I guess you could call it clever set of commercials now, where there's an older guy who's training
Exactly what you're going to talk about.
Homeowners not to be like their parents. So they just create these scenarios where they're doing the things that their parents used to do. And some of them are actually pretty clever. After the first 5 or 6, they're kind of annoying, I think. But that's just it. He's trying to untrain them not to do what their parents did in social situations. But that's what we're talking about. Take control of your process.
Yeah, I knew the minute you said insurance company, I said I know exactly where he's going with that. Even though the other insurance company has their commercials, but those in particular, see, that's how I know we vibrate the same frequency. Like there's a lot of insurance companies you could have chose, and there's some that gets heavy, much more rotation than those do. But I knew you were going there because that's where I would have went. Yeah. That exact commercial and those stories, and it's funny, it's interesting. The writers, I could tell, thought about that and decided to put something interesting out there. And see, that's where social media has now become, and people don't understand that. You have 2 ways you can really get yourself positioned on social media. You can pay for it from folks who already have networks and followers, and you can get on their access and leverage that. It's going to be you got to pay, rightly so, because those folks invest a lot of time and effort to get that network built up that's listening to them and their audience. Or you got to pay for advertising, which you got to pay more consistent to get folks who don't know you to finally, like Bob's Furniture came out of nowhere. Now all I see is Bob's commercials everywhere, and I was like 10 years ago, there was no Bob's Furniture, but he's positioned himself through advertising to the point now I'm sure that's the first thing you think about. If you're looking about low cost furniture, budget furniture, you're going to think about Bob's. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that as far as that. So I just want to lay that out there for folks that just drill through that noise and filter out that noise because it's not helpful. So now we're going to move to our last section of our show, which is we're going to highlight and give flowers to people who we believe have lived a fully human life or currently living a fully human life. And I'm eager to hear the person you said you had in your mind. So why don't you start with yours, Reggie?
Yeah, so I'm going to just note somebody I've admired for some years because of her background and what she does now, but especially because of what happened to her yesterday. U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, she was doing a public talk yesterday because of what's going on in Minneapolis with ICE. And some guy came out of the audience as she was talking and had some kind of a squeeze bottle and sprayed her with it. And they haven't identified, as of this morning, they haven't identified what the liquid was yet, other than to say it was foul smelling. So I have my own idea what that might have been. But I don't know what it was, so I'm not going to say it. But anyway, this guy comes out of the audience, sprays her. She backs up, and immediately her protection, like the bodyguards, the big guy just grabbed him. But her response, first the guy runs at her, so she doesn't know if it's a gun, if he's going to tackle her, but he sprays her, and she can smell whatever it is. But her response was, and I'd say, I'm laughing out of respect, and she's tiny. I don't know how tall she is, but her response was she backs up, she gets sprayed, she smells it, and then she moves towards him, like she gets out from behind the podium and goes after the guy. And it looked like her fists were clenched. I mean, which is just rage or anger or fear or whatever in the moment. If we can all relate to that. And then you can hear, like, so the police and whoever else was present, cuff this guy and take him out to the applause of the people. And then you can see this really big bodyguard who just like this monster guy is, he's got an earpiece in and everything. And he says to her, he goes, "We're done. You can't stay here now." She goes, "Oh no, she goes, I need to finish because I need at least 10 more minutes to finish." And he's saying no, and she's angry. And she basically says, to use some kind of an expletive, and she said, "We're not going to let, that's the kind of guy we can't let stop us. If I don't finish talking, he's successful." So they let her finish. But so I admired her courage in that moment, but more specifically, she's one of 4 women, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I'm going to slay the other 2 names, so I'm not going to say them, who were known as the Squad when they were elected in 2018, who Donald Trump has, publicly, as president of the United States, has insulted, says they should all go back to the countries they were born in. Omar is the only one who wasn't born in the United States, and she's a naturalized citizen, came here when she was 11 from Somalia. So, I mean, she reminds me, different set of circumstances, but in terms of her presence, like in the spirit of John Lewis. All right, you're going to knock me down, crack my head open. I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. So, and that's a great compliment, because I think John Lewis was one of the great American heroes. But Ilhan Omar just continues to stand up for the people. And she didn't say power to Somali immigrants. She was basically saying, we are Minnesota strong, to use that language with Boston used after the marathon bombing and everything. So she was talking about serving the people of Minnesota. Only bigots see her as a Somalian woman. Right? She's an American citizen who was elected to public office in the U.S. House of Representatives, and she was there to speak on behalf of her constituents. And the Republicans, especially Donald Trump, consistently have tried to reduce her to, like, she's a Somali woman. She doesn't belong in this country. So anyway, that was probably more. I got a little bit passionate there.
Well, I think that's a great choice, and thank you for honoring her. When you said her, the minute you said, "I'm going to lift her," I knew who you're talking about again. I immediately said, that's who he's going to go with, because I'm familiar with the story. And so my thoughts on that real quick is the fact, I think that Trump did more than just make her a Somalian woman. He dehumanized her.
Yeah.
And when he dehumanized her, that gives the bigots the right to say she does not human. That's just been as you talk about in your book, American Narratives, that's been the playbook. Once you dehumanize the population, now you can go in and do all, and now you're justified to do all the things you want. So now the 1% who makes that decision dehumanizes you, and now the collective now sees that to say we're justified in supporting that thinking. But you're right. I think she shows strength, courage, because I could imagine, number one, you got to worry about what that sin is for days until they tell you what it is. So not knowing makes it even worse, because now you don't know how to act or how to even treat. So the anxiety around that has to be horrible. But then there's just the fact that now that you've been dehumanized, you can kind of expect that to be the norm now. You got to really start preparing yourself for, I can't be in open forums anymore. I might get shot. I might get stabbed, because Trump is creating that thing. And again, showing on Hawkins' level, you vibrate down that fear and anger and shame, you're liable to do anything. So, but that also now is a great segue into the person who I want to lift up. And like you, I'm going to go to Minnesota as well. And I'm going to lift up Alex J. Jeffrey Peretti. Mm-hmm. And I lift him up for several reasons, probably different than what other people think. But not only was he a human being, and he acted, that's what fully human looks like. And I said I wasn't going to veer off the people on my board behind me unless somebody really stood up, and that stands out for several reasons. Number one, he's of the demographic that is not being attacked by ICE. So he literally has, to your point, do I have to be involved? And what should my action be? He could easily watch that from TV and be like, huh, I feel sorry for those immigrants, but I'm not, there's nothing I can do about it. He's down there doing something about it. And not only was he doing something about that day, he's also, they show, has a history of that, right? He's a nurse, so he's compassionate, he's sympathetic, he's emotionally intelligent. So that's who he is. And that's what I'm saying. That's a person, that's a demonstration of somebody vibrating at an energy of love for them to, that's who he is. He operates and vibrates at that level. And so much so, here's the other reason why I wanted to lift him up as well, because he did something that was strategically brilliant. And that is, he's a white man and he took a handgun down there. And he forced the Republicans now to say, well, he had a gun. And it's like a white man with a gun destroys the matrix. That's an interruption in the matrix now, because now they're forced to try to use that as an excuse to say you can't go to a rally or a protest peacefully with a gun when they've done that and they defended that. So it's like, so he made a tremendous sacrifice. He should be someone that gets lifted up throughout our history as a hero, because that's heroic actions in truest form that we're watching. So I want to lift him up, Alex Peretti.
Yeah, amen. And he never, they would never have known he was carrying a licensed firearm if they hadn't attacked him. They would
and they only attacked him because he was defending a woman had been sprayed. So he wouldn't even have gotten attacked. So again, look at that chain of causation. He forced that on him. To me, that is true to the universe. Unfortunately, for his family, I pray for them and everyone that loves him, knew him, and that's hurt by his loss. But he was used for the universe in order to bring about a change. And I think something's going to compel and grow like a snowball from this, not just what's happening immediately, but I think that this is what may be the trigger that when we look at history, that really brings Trump down and his whole evil regime. Because most people now, even the Republicans, leads having to pull themselves back like, whoa, again, white man with a gun, interruption in the matrix. You just messed up our whole argument with that. You know what I'm saying? So it's better that Kristi Noem get fired than for us to have to, deal with that in the NRA. We don't want the NRA fighting against us as well. Then the administration's done. Once you get them against you, you can't, because now you can't go back to another protest and say when someone else does it, you defend their right to have a gun. So
okay, the difference between Kyle Rittenhouse and Alex Peretti. Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines with a long gun, killed 2 people, wounded another, and was exonerated because he had a right to do that in America. Alex Peretti goes to a peaceful protest, is videotaping things, tries to help a woman who had been knocked down and sprayed, never draws his weapon, and gets shot 10 times. And now he's being demonized for having a handgun, which he was licensed to carry in the state of Minnesota. So yeah, there's a lot
and didn't even have it in his hand.
No, he never drew it. They would not have known he had a weapon had they not accosted him.
They violated every right that man had. So that's why I said that it's not about skimming pigmentation. And the minute everybody can see that, as we bring the show to a close, the minute you all see this, what we're talking about here, that we're human beings at the end of the day. Not all of us are fully human, which that's where Alex Peretti's actions on that level, but we're human beings. And once we understand that, then we can stop all the divisiveness and hate, because there's no reason to hate immigrants in Minnesota, regardless of the Somalian or whoever they are. What is the immigrant, how they really personally impacted your life? And why do you hate them? Because you've been told a false narrative.
And I'll just add one thing to the Somalian story. There was fraud in the state of Minnesota. I don't know if it was Medicare, Medicaid, or I forgot, food assistance. I forget what it was. And many of the people involved in it were Somalian immigrants, right? And that's the excuse Trump has used to send troops in to get rid of the Somalian immigrants. Now, the only problem with using that as a pretense, like that's historical truth. The woman who initiated the fraud was a white woman. She was investigated, indicted, and convicted. She's currently in prison. And I forget how many of the other people who she convinced to join her in the fraud were Somalian, and some of them were, and some of them are in prison. So that was adjudicated by state, local, and federal. The FBI was involved in it. It was investigated. There were indictments. There were convictions. It was done. It's not an ongoing case. They don't need ICE in there to get rid of immigrants. The people who committed the crime were faced with the rule of law, were convicted, and a bunch of them are in prison now. So it's a red herring. It's just more lies and hypocrisy. And people, you won't hear that story on Fox News or Newsmax or America One or whatever it is. They won't give you all that information. And there are Americans who will just think that Somalians are raiding the treasury, So anyway, we're way over here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But that's they really hoarding. That's based, and Trump's he tried to have one, but he just keeps falling apart because he don't even have brilliant strategists around him. He just got loyalists. So his falls apart. So as we wrap up our show, next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have these discussions, how we can heal America's narratives and become more fully human. Join us. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you.